Columbus Day, an American celebration with days off work, music, and parades. We all know that Columbus Day is about the discovery of America, but do you really know the whole story? Probably not. Cristoforo Colombo, also known as Christopher Columbus, was an Italian explorer who wanted to find new trade routes to India, China, Japan, and the Spice Islands. He was determined to find a direct water route west from Europe to Asia. Born in 1451 in the Republic of Genoa, Columbus was an ambitious and intelligent individual. He gained valuable knowledge of the Atlantic currents from his early sailing days in the Mediterranean, and later in the Atlantic Ocean. By 1480, Columbus and his brother Bartolomeo had a plan. The concept of sailing westward to reach Asia was not entirely new, but Columbus was particularly determined to pursue this idea. He sought support for his plan from various European monarchs, including the King of Portugal and the King and Queen of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella. After years of negotiations, he finally gained the sponsorship of the Spanish monarchy in 1492. Columbus and his crew of 90 men started their first voyage and set sail west on August 3, 1492, in hopes of discovering a faster trade route to India. The small fleet consisted of 3 ships, the Santa Maria, the Pinta, and the Nina. The conditions on the journey were harsh. Much of the food was dry and filled with maggots. Since freshwater supplies were limited, the explorers mainly relied on alcohol, as it never expires and it kills diseases. During the journey, tensions grew high among the crew members as there were no signs of land for weeks. Columbus maintained his confidence in their course, and on October 12th, after a 2-month journey, they finally reached land. Columbus thought they had reached Asia, but in reality they had arrived at the Bahamas in the Americas. This marked the beginning of the European exploration and colonization of the Americas, which would change the course of history forever. Columbus continued his exploration, sailing through the Caribbean and reaching the islands of Cuba and Hispaniola. He believed that these islands were part of Asia, another testament to his lack of knowledge of geography. He established a small settlement called La Navidad on Hispaniola, leaving 39 men behind while he returned to Spain to report his findings. His return to Spain was triumphant, and Columbus was celebrated for his discoveries. He was awarded the title of Admiral of the Ocean Sea and given the resources for a second voyage. In September 1493, Columbus set sail again, this time with a fleet of 17 ships and around 1,200 men. The primary goal of this expedition was to establish permanent colonies in the newly discovered lands and convert the native populations to Christianity. Upon his return to Hispaniola, Columbus found the settlement of La Navidad destroyed and all 39 men dead. He established a new settlement called La Isabela, but this colony would also be plagued with problems, such as disease, food shortages, and conflicts with the native Taino people. Columbus's treatment of the native populations was brutal and ruthless. From Columbus's journal, he wrote, "They brought us parrots and balls of cotton and spears and many other things, which they exchanged for the glass beads and hawk's bells. They willingly traded everything they owned. They were well built, with good bodies and handsome features. They do not bear arms, and do not know them, for I showed them a sword. They took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron. Their spears are made of cane. They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want." He enslaved many of them, forcing them to work in gold mines or as laborers in the new colonies. Additionally, the Europeans brought with them diseases like smallpox, measles, and the flu, which the native populations had no immunity against. This led to widespread death and suffering among the indigenous people. Columbus embarked on his 3rd voyage in 1498, during which he explored the coast of South America and discovered the mouth of the Orinoco River in present-day Venezuela. By this time, the situation in the colonies had worsened, and the new colonists were unhappy with how they were being treated by Columbus and his brothers. They revolted against their harsh treatment and poor living conditions, which prompted the Spanish government to intervene. A new governor was sent to take charge of the situation and bring order to the colonies. As word spread about Columbus's cruel treatment of the natives and his mismanagement of the colonies, his reputation began to suffer. Within 60 years after Columbus's voyages, the Taino population was decimated due to disease, enslavement, and the impact of European colonization on their way of life. In 1500, Columbus was arrested and brought back to Spain in chains. He and his brothers were imprisoned for their crimes and mismanagement of the colonies. After spending around 6 weeks in jail, Columbus was released but stripped of his noble titles and governorship. Despite his fall from grace, Columbus still yearned to return to the Americas. In 1502, he persuaded the Spanish government to grant him one last voyage, the fourth and final one. This expedition aimed to find a westward route to the Maluku Islands, also known as the Spice Islands, in present-day Indonesia. Columbus believed that finding this route would restore his reputation and wealth. The fourth voyage, however, was plagued with misfortune from the start. His crew was demoralized, and many had lost faith in him. They faced numerous challenges, including shipwrecks, storms, and hostile encounters with native populations. Columbus and his men became stranded on Jamaica for a year, and many of them died during this time due to disease and hunger. When Columbus finally returned to Spain in 1504, he was a broken man. His hopes of restoring his reputation and fortune were dashed when he learned of Queen Isabella's death just 3 weeks after his return. Her death marked the end of any possibility of Columbus returning to the New World. By the end of his voyages, Columbus had been directly or indirectly responsible for the deaths and suffering of a large number of Native Americans. It is difficult to determine the exact number, but it was a significant portion of the native population. On May 20th, 1506, Columbus died of writer's syndrome at 55 years old. Christopher Columbus has been referred to as both a hero and a villain due to his cruelty and abuse of political power. While he is credited with opening the doors to the European exploration and colonization of the Americas, his actions also led to the decimation of native populations and the establishment of a brutal colonial system. His name will forever be etched in history, but the debate surrounding his legacy continues to this day.